I am Marty Schneer, the Executive Director of the JCC, and we are pleased to be hosting. We have a few members in the audience, or? Good. We are pleased to be running tonight's forum. The candidates, if you didn't know already, are running for the 8th Essex District State Representative, which includes Marblehead, Swampscott, and portions of Lynn. The JCC is a multi-service organization where everyone is welcome. We have been engaged in strengthening the democratic process through our cultural and political events, where we periodically offer opportunities to hear speakers with different points of view and an open exchange of ideas. Please check us out online, jccns.org. There are 6 Democrats running for election with no Republicans seeking the nomination. You're starting to misbehave. Therefore, it is likely that whoever wins the primary on September 6th will be the sole candidate on the general election ballot on November 8th and will be the next 8th Essex District State Rep. So we have a few ground rules. One includes no clapping. We solicited questions prior to the event, which we used to create the questions that will be asked today. No questions will be taken from the audience. In the interest of time, we had to pare down the questions to 6. Out of respect for the candidates, please remain quiet during the event and refrain from applauding, cheering, and heaven forbid, booing. Please take a minute also to silence your cell phones. We would hate to ask you to leave if you don't follow the rules, but we will. Okay, I will now read the names of the candidates as they appear on the September 6th slate. Jennifer W.B. Armeni, Dianne Mary Slatwick Bayless, Tristan Smith, Teresa M. Toro, Douglas Thompson, and Polly Tacone. The program will be as follows. Each candidate will have a minute to make an opening statement. I will pose 6 questions and the candidates will have a minute and a half to answer each question. We will start with Ms. Armeni and rotate to the right. Each candidate will have a minute to make a closing statement. The timekeepers will raise a yellow card when there's 15 seconds left and a red card when the time is up. So, again, my pleasure to welcome you, and Jenny, you're up.
Is the mic on? Can you hear me?
No, we need, it's hard to hear at the back.
Okay. Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Woohoo! Okay. I am Jenny Armeni. 16 years ago, I dropped my son at the Olive Room and my daughter in the infant room here to begin their educational journey. Tomorrow morning, Michael and I will be driving my son to college. There is no doubt that the time he spent here was formative. I am running to give every child that kind of start and a future of opportunities. I look forward to telling you about my unique skill set, some of which I honed on Capitol Hill, some of which I honed on Beacon Hill, and some of which I inherited from my grandfather, Jacob Belinsky. Jacob started campaigning for Brooklyn Democrats not long after he arrived from on Ellis Island. He would have been proud of Elect Blue, the group that I created to help Democrats win U.S. House and Senate seats. He was determined to be part of his country's political process, especially after my grandmother's family was murdered. in the Holocaust.
Jenny,
I am named for Jacob, and I am proud to continue his work.
I think that noise, because you're having a problem, means you're done.
That's good. I'm ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Doug Thompson, and I'm running to be your next state representative to make real progress for the people in this district on the issues that matter, like climate change, affordable housing and healthcare, reproductive health freedom, and getting special interest money out of politics. I grew up in a working class union family, and we went through some tough times, and I helped to put myself through college and grad school at the Kennedy School. I've been a lifelong Democrat. I bring a 25-year career as a senior leader in healthcare and finance. I was the chief financial officer for the state Medicaid program, where I managed an $8.5 billion budget through its entire legislative process, beginning to end. I've helped over 1.5 million people throughout my career and helped generate hundreds of millions of dollars in savings. I look forward to bringing that scale of experience to this race and to this job. I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, thank you to the JCC for having this event tonight. My name is Dianne Slatwick Bayless. I'm running for state representative because there's a lot to do on issues. I feel like I have the experience and the skills and the passion that it takes to get the work done. My family and I actually live across the street on Tycehurst Lane. We have 4 kids and my youngest is going to the village school in 6th grade. We're pleased to be in a town that was in a legislative district with such a vibrant Jewish community. My late father, Red Slavic, was Jewish, and my 2 stepchildren are being brought up in Jewish traditions. I'm a full-time immigration attorney, and when I'm not getting paid, I've done a lot of pro bono work for a nonprofit in Boston called Kind, and we give free legal representation to unaccompanied children. I've also been a long-time Democrat and an activist against gun violence for many years. And I'm a surfer. I have a love for the ocean, and you know, it's a big focus. The environment is a big focus of my campaign. And I just wanted to thank you all. And my website is votefordianne.com. 2 N's, no me.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to the Marblehead JCC for hosting this candidates forum, and of course, thank you to my colleagues for joining me. My name is Tristan Smith. Knocking on thousands of doors across the district, 2 things have become increasingly apparent. And the first is that people are very willing to share their personal experiences and concerns with me. And the second is that people want to know the fundamental differences that separate me from the other people who are running against me. Simply put, they want to know how will these differences make me a better and more effective legislator for all of us, for our families, and for the communities that we all live in. And tonight my challenge is to explain to all listening and watching my vision, my goals, my passion, my values, and my transparency, and what makes those different that make me not only a good choice this year for voters, but in fact and in substance, the best choice for voters this year for state representative. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Terry Toro, and there are 3 things you need to know about me. I'm a coalition builder, a very skilled negotiator, and a voice for the people. I am a 6th generation Marbleheader. I was born Teresa Colbert to my father, and my mother immigrated from Europe in the 50s. I was raised in public housing, I attended public schools, and I'm a single mom of 2 very sassy and fabulous daughters that are going to college on Friday. God help me, my youngest is a freshman. So it's a good time for me to become your state representative. I've owned 2 small businesses and worked 3 jobs most of my life to try to make ends meet. So I understand the struggle of working parents and of small business owners. I've 3 times been elected president of the Marblehead Municipal Employees Union. I'm also hold the elected position on the executive board of the AFL-CIO, North Shore Labor Council, and also on the Marblehead Democratic Town Committee. So I am no stranger to politics, and I will fight for all of you in the State House when elected. Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pauline Titcomb, and I'm running to be your next state representative because my experience in public office and as a public defense attorney in the field of child welfare law shows a readiness for action on the job and the ability to lead. But most importantly, they show my understanding and unwavering commitment to bettering people's lives through creating structural policy change. As I said, I'm a child and welfare law attorney. I fight to protect my clients' rights and ensure that children and families get the services they need to be reunited. In my nearly 10 years of municipal experience, I've directed town policy decisions, implemented legislative change, developed financial policy, guaranteed a more transparent government, and prioritized the well-being of residents in the community. I didn't shy away from difficult conversations, and I didn't back down from what I believed was in the best interest of those residents, even when I was outnumbered. I didn't involve myself in local government and volunteer because it was convenient for me. In fact, it's some of the most difficult times of my life, when I was pregnant, nursing, raising infants. But I'm involved because I have a sense of responsibility and urgency that we need to create positive social change now. I know that I would be willing to stand up in front of any leader, and I think you're right about the, about the microphone. I know I would be able to stand up.
So you know what it means.
Yes, I'm just finishing my sentence, but I will stop. Thank you.
Okay. It seems to be working like a bell. It doesn't sound as nice as a bell. The first question is going to be for Doug Thompson. The state is reporting a $5 billion surplus on a $57 billion annual budget. How do you think the state should spend the surplus? And more generally, what are your fiscal priorities for the use of taxpayer dollars?
Great question. Well, as people may know, there's a great debate going on about this issue right now. There is a law, 62F, that requires that approximately $2.5 billion be returned to the taxpayers. This came up at the end of the legislative session, a little bit of a surprise it seems to many, and now there's going to be a discussion about whether or not to follow through with that law or make amendments to it. It also kind of derailed an economic development bill at the same time. And so this type of situation is critical. It may or may not come before your next state representative. It may be dealt with before that. But for my priorities, I think we do need to take a look at whether or not we continue to pursue and proceed with that law as is. If we do make any amendments to it, it needs to go through an extremely thorough public vetting process. Not the traditional, like in the middle of the night with a 300-page bill that no one sees. So we need to potentially look at that, but generally speaking, that is the will of the vote, that is a law, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, that needs to be pursued. There's still a lot of other money, frankly, sloshing around right now, and there's a lot to do with that money. We need to invest in our transportation system, we need to invest in our education system, we need to find efficiencies and cost savings in our healthcare system, while greatly expanding coverage and care, which I hope to be able to talk about more in length today. And I see the red card up, and before I get the bell, I'm going to pause.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, I take the T to work, and I see how bad the transportation system is. We really deserve a safe, reliable, green, modern transportation system. And if there is money to be spent, that should be spent on transportation. You know, we see trains catching on fire. Unfortunately, I get off at the Broadway station where that poor man was dragged to his death, and it was just awful. We need to use federal infrastructure money. We need to just get the basics done so we can have a safe ride. You know, people shouldn't fear just having to go to work. This is just crazy. And I think surplus should be going to the schools as well. I've done a lot of doors with all of you. I've met you at your doors, I've built my platform on that. And a lot of teachers and therapists and people have told me we definitely need more counselors, we definitely need more therapists on the school staff. Our kids are under stress. They're getting through COVID. They're dealing with this epidemic of gun violence, and it's just not fair. And before we can go forward, we need to do something to help them. King's Speech is a big one as well. I mean, it was great that Lori Ehrlich and Senator Crichton put $5 million last year into the start of the cleanup, but there's a lot more work to do, and it's got to be done. And I will go to the legislature and say, you know what, we want that money for that.
So for me, what I think is extremely important to remember is by the time the next state representative is sworn in for this district, we will have gone almost a year without having any representation here in the 8th Essex District. Let alone the fact that we lost a champion in Lori Ehrlich, who for 14 years really fought tirelessly for us. So I have to disagree with something that Doug said, that this might not come up for us who are being elected next, because by the time the next one of us is chosen on September 6th, there are talks about the legislature coming back into session to discuss this very economic development bill that got stalled and didn't ultimately pass. It's extremely important that whoever is elected of the 6 of us as the nominee, the Democratic Party's nominee, and the only person on the ballot in November, is part of those conversations to ensure that we're being heard and that whatever is in that economic development bill takes the accounts of Marblehead, Swampscott, and Lynn as a part of it. For me, that means number one is our public transportation system. I see public transportation as a way to combat the climate crisis as well, where we need to invest in a modern 21st century green public transportation system. We need to electrify the commuter rail. Senator Crichton recently got us $50 million in the transportation bond bill to electrify the Newburyport-Rockport line. It's extremely important that the next state rep is ready to work with the incoming Healy administration, fingers crossed, to make sure that bill is put out to bond. So these are the types of things that we really have to be ready to get going on day one, because as I said, it will be almost a year since we had a state representative when the next one of us is sworn in January.
Okay, my 2 priorities for that money. Number one, I think that the law is the law and we should return it to the taxpayers. Perhaps we ask them to donate to a specific cause. Education, something that's important to them. Affordable housing, education, something like that. I think many people who are getting a refund type of thing would be willing to do that. I know I certainly would. I've been talking a lot to all the seniors in the community. I had an ice cream social today in Marblehead, and I spoke to seniors in Lynn last week and seniors in Swampscott this week. And I am really upset that seniors in our community now cannot afford to stay where they raised their children and where they worked all their lives and contributed to their communities. So I would like to see those funds go towards senior housing and making sure that these people that have earned the right to stay here and to be in the towns where they have their support systems have that option and have a place to go and have that support. The seniors it's a respect for our past, and respect for the future would be education. We need to focus on education if we're going to do anything with this world that we've created. So, you know, short of passing the Fair Share Amendment and maybe Student Opportunity Act funds being actually allocated when they're supposed to be, I would say that education is a little bit more TLC in senior housing. And I've got the red card.
Thanks. Yes, like as Doug said, the law in the books 62F and requires us the legislature to return the money to the taxpayers, and any change the legislature decides to make to that law should be applied proactively. I think the law is the law. The excess revenue the windfall tax has already come in, and we should just return it to the taxpayers and look to amend going forward. And of course, as Tristan said as well, the economic development bill will be interesting how that plays out with that discussion. And hopefully it'll lead to a larger scale discussion, which is kind of what this windfall tax says, this excess tax says to me. You know, we've had this 62F was triggered, that's kind of once out of 2 times in history, and we have a historic 7.3% increase in revenues, and yet we have an MBTA system that's falling apart. We have poverty levels at 11% in the state. We have a housing crisis that history's never seen before. Something's not right, and clearly there's something with our tax structure that's not right, and probably multiple things that I would recommend changing, and I think we need to look at the structural deficit and really ask ourselves, what are our priorities? How is this taxation working? Why was this windfall tax triggered? It is, as a side note, ARPA funds and the COVID pandemic did bring federal funds into the state that might play into that. But nevertheless, we've had all of this growth, and we need to look at the structural changes and really get serious about that. Thanks.
Thank you. The Economic Development Bill was incredibly important, and it will be a shame if what was in it is not passed. It had the earned income tax credit, it had the senior circuit breaker, which helps seniors stay in their homes by offsetting the amount they pay in property taxes or in rent, and it had the child tax credit in it. So these things are incredibly important to giving relief to our families right now, and that bill has got to be passed. The 62F provision is somewhat troubling because, and it needs to be reformed. It is a very regressive tax. 62F sends money back to income taxpayers, but it has pulled money from all of our citizens, regardless of income, in the form of gas taxes, in the form of taxes you pay at the grocery store, or in any shop you go into. So families, working poor families are paying into this, and they may not get anything out of this 62F money. So this 62F needs to be reformed. I'm not willing, given everything that we've talked about up here, including a transportation system on fire, including our schools. I have lived with a child through COVID. We need more money for academic supports and social emotional supports.
Thank you all. There we go. Second question, Dianne, you'll be first to answer. Mass Health has provided health insurance to countless thousands of low-income Massachusetts residents. Yet many feel we need to continue to improve access and affordability. What specific suggestions do you have for making those improvements?
Well, I agree. We have to do more. As far as access to healthcare, the latest budget that was passed, at least there's going to be more access for subsidized health insurance. But we still have things like deductibles and co-pays that are just so expensive, and it hurts most people to get access to what they really need, and we have to work on that, bring those prices down for just regular medicine that people need every day. Sometimes they can't afford it, and that shouldn't be happening in this country or this district. And healthcare overall, I think the quality of healthcare is just so important. We're losing on nurses. I've read that 60% of our nurses are thinking of moving to a different profession. Who's to blame them? They risked their lives through COVID. They have bad working conditions. We need to give them some incentive for them to continue and through grants or loan payments. But also, an oversight of our elderly. We have to make sure they're getting quality care. I know personally I saw that they don't. My father was dying in a rest home and my mother was in the same rest home, very ill. 9 kids in our family, thank God. We all took shifts. We knew exactly which shift needed to be covered because we knew that they weren't getting quality care from that specific nurse. And all people do not have this, and it's just not fair.
Thank you. So the issue of healthcare and of course affordability in general is of course at the front of everyone's minds. It certainly has affected all of us. And there are many things we can do within the existing system. We can fight for more transparency in the pharmaceutical industry to bring down the costs of prescription drugs. We have to do more for nurse retention. So many are leaving the industry after the COVID-19 pandemic when they weren't cared for and they were in there on the front lines without the required sanitary protective equipment. But I think one thing that we can't be afraid of is being ready to reform the whole system. Mass health, of course, has so many efficiencies in it. I understand why we have the system we have, and I'm glad that we live in Massachusetts. But it still isn't enough. We can't be afraid to say we need to look at a single-payer healthcare system. And I know I'm the young guy up here, I'm the progressive up here, and I'm saying single-payer, socialized medicine. But the fact of the matter is, folks, that's exactly why I'm running. I'm not afraid of these big ideas. I'm not afraid to question exactly what's going on with the structure. And this is one thing that I will not negotiate on. I truly believe that we need to move toward a single-payer healthcare system in this state. It will be more efficient and more people will be able to gain access to the healthcare that they need. Healthcare is a right, not a commodity, and we need to treat it like that. And we have to be bold enough to do it.
Okay, so I am endorsed by the Massachusetts Nurses Association and SEIU 509 and SEIU 1199. Those are healthcare workers and CPAs and nurses. So I've had long conversations with them about, and I stood on the line for all three of them. Beverly nurses, I stood on the picket line for the Saugus rehab workers. The Saugus rehab workers were making $14 an hour. The CPAs that take care of everybody, our loved ones, in the rehab centers. At this point, Mass Health, yes, there are problems with it, but Massachusetts has the best health care in the state. And I think for short term, we need to help our people in the district navigate this system. Has anybody ever tried to fill out one of those applications? They're this thick. If you get one thing wrong, you're just knocked out of it. You have to start from the very beginning again. So I would like to see some funding put towards that, where we would have people that would help us navigate those very, very complicated and red tape heavy systems. In the long term, I agree with Tristan. I think that single payer healthcare, it needs to be looked at. It can't go through the way it is right now because we can't start taking people's Blue Cross Blue Shield that they've had for years and they love away from them. We have to figure out where that line is, but it's way past due that we have healthcare in this country and in this state that covers everyone. So, thank you.
Thank you, yes. So as Dianne touched upon, one of the benefits of the 2023 budget is the 2-year pilot program that the legislature implemented to expand the connector care to almost 40,000 additional families, and the connector care, the subsidized insurance program. So it lowers the premiums, deductibles, co-pays, and expands to people. And I gotta say, I mean, people now qualify under this pilot program for $140,000 a year for a family of 4. When I hear that amount, I'm like, I'm included in that, right? So I am a privileged person. This is expanding it, but it's still really covering just the basics. I know my budget is so squeezed because of all of my healthcare costs for myself and my children. So it's a good thing. I hope it's permanent, and I hope we go farther. And obviously to include and protect reproductive rights, especially right now, contraception, abortions, labor and childbirth costs. I think those would be great. Dental insurance. We act like the Stone Age with dental care. I mean, it's part of health. But the larger question, again, the longer term question is, why are we subsidizing? Why are we having to subsidize private insurance programs? It's like the homeowner's insurance. If you use it, you don't qualify anymore, but you're required to have it by law. So the government steps in and bridges that gap until you qualify for private homeowners insurance again. It is like kowtowing to private insurance companies, and I think Medicare for All is one of the, I totally agree with Terry, we have to ease in and let people adjust for what they know, but that is the long-term solution. Thank you.
First thing I want to say is absolutely healthcare is a human right. Achieving universal coverage, whether it's Medicare for all or some kind of single payer system, has to be our goal at some point. We have to be working towards that. Until then, we've got to make sure that patients take priority over profits. In Massachusetts, we have an interesting problem. All but 2.5% of our people are covered by some form of insurance. The problem is, some of that insurance is not great, and our families are suffering because of high copays, high deductibles, co-insurance. So yes, I think we should be proud of our coverage numbers, but the coverage itself is the problem for a lot of families, and that's what we need to be working on. At the state level, bringing costs down means getting tough on mergers and acquisitions. We know that hospital consolidation makes care harder and more expensive, and the same goes for the consolidation on the pharmaceutical side. 3 or 4 companies control 80% of the pharmacy benefit managers. These are the people who control the cost of your medicine. That's controlled by 3 or 4 companies. The state has got to start getting tough on these mergers. Drug spending grew 7.7%.
Jenny, I think we're out now.
Well, I've been waiting for this question for several forums, believe it or not. Mass Health is 40% of our state budget. I've managed that budget. It's only part of our larger $60 billion healthcare industry here in Massachusetts. I agree with the problems and the passion that people have indicated here. And I have a very detailed plan about what to do about it at dougforrep.com. Here are the highlights. First of all, we need to make major investments in primary care, mental health, and geriatrics. Actually, Governor Baker has proposed something similar to this, and I think we should see him and raise him, basically in terms of what he's proposed. You can see the details on my website. We need to have a major investment in our public and private mental health system. We need to have more scrutiny, as Jenny alluded to, of prescription drug prices. Our Health Policy Commission can have more oversight to regulate those prices and get them approved or disapproved. We need major simplification in the administration of our healthcare system. We need to move towards a public option. People have talked about wanting to get to single payer, but how do you get there? This is the way there. Public option, as we talked about in Obamacare, is a voluntary way for people and businesses to start moving and migrating towards a single payer plan. Many people don't talk about long-term services and supports as part of our healthcare system. It's a major, major issue for our seniors. All of us are heading there, some of us sooner than others. And we need a public system, basically, that insurance system that you don't have to buy and be very wealthy or get on Medicaid to be able to afford the services that almost all of us are going to need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Question number 3 deals with education. What role should parents play in their children's education? And does that include input on curriculum? I think it's worth noting before you answer the decrease in public school enrollment in Marblehead High School and 4% in the state. So again, the question about parent role. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So, as a former public school teacher, currently I'm a high school track and field coach at St. Mary's in Lynn. So I've taught in the public schools, I've taught in a private school. For me, I think that parent input leads to a very slippery slope. And I think it's very, very important that we're ensuring that we have a curriculum that reflects the values that we want to see in our society, because those are the values that we're going to bring to our children. I think one very, very big place that we can improve is creating a curriculum that values diversity in all of its forms. And I'm sick and tired of the word tolerance. I don't want to hear a curriculum about tolerance. We shouldn't tolerate our neighbors. We should embrace our neighbors. We should celebrate our neighbors, and we should love our neighbors. And I think that public schools are a great way to bring those values that we want to see to our students who may come from homes that may be a little more narrow-minded. So for me, I think that it's a slippery slope. And for that reason, I believe we should have a very comprehensive and forward-thinking curriculum for our students in our schools.
I agree that parents should have input into the curriculum. However, many parents, working parents, or there are a lot of kids that don't have perfect lives at home. They don't have parents that can get involved. They don't have parents that have the time to go to a PTO meeting or the confidence. I grew up in public housing, and my mother always said, "Oh, I can't go to those PTO meetings because I didn't pay rent. I pay rent. We don't own a house here. I don't have that say." And I think that when we're talking about parental input to curriculum, we have to keep that in mind, that some kids are not going to be represented by their parents. So as much as I feel that the input, the school boards need to listen to parents and they need to hear everybody's concerns, I do believe that everything needs to be equitable across the board. And we need to, have our teachers, obviously teachers' input. And we have to keep in mind that some of these kids don't have the same opportunities and the same support at home. And I think it's important that we give that support in the schools to these kids, because they're all our kids, all of them. And everyone deserves opportunities and an equal chance at a great education, including the parents.
Thanks. So the way I look at parents' role, sorry, I didn't turn that up, okay. In public education is, my son's school teacher, principal, at Stanley and Swampscott, had said this as, and it stuck with me, as a bridge, there's a bridge between the school and the home environment. I think that's where the parent's role needs to come in the educational environment, that we can work. If there is a disconnect and parents are feeling a disconnect, then the school system and the parents can work to figure out ways to build bridges, PTO, school board meetings, other creative ways of bridging that gap and filling the gap back and forth and kind of working together more collaboratively is the way. In terms of parents' input on curriculum, I think it's best to leave that up to the experts personally, especially in a public education system where you're really trying to cover equal access to education for the most people, especially protecting the most vulnerable populations. Otherwise, there's private school or homeschooling or options, not for everybody again, but that again goes to why we need to have more equitable access to services in education. And I think, again, I remember actually speaking to somebody in this room, and she was saying how public school education, we were talking about how important it is, and the way she articulated it was just that, this is reality, and you don't always like every aspect of reality, and you learn tolerance, and you learn, oh, that didn't feel good, why did that teacher say that way, or whatever, and these are the discussions that you can bring home as teaching moments for your kids to be members of society, because we're not always going to agree, and we've got to figure out ways that we can teach each other how to work through those and conflicts to a resolution. Thanks.
Parents are not educators in a public school setting. When we enroll our kids, we are enrolling them in a curriculum developed by educators. I'm fine with parents expressing their views, but they don't have veto power over what happens in the classroom. The demographic shift, Marty, that you referred to is, the shift in the numbers, especially here in Marblehead, that can be attributed to a demographic shift for sure, and also COVID. A lot of families decided that they were dissatisfied with the experience in public schools during COVID and shifted to private school settings. And that's exactly why we need more state support for what I like to call in the doors a COVID recovery for kids. And we need, because as you know, our budget here is strapped. And that's not unusual. Cities and towns across the state are having this kind of trouble. The state needs to come in with more funds to help our kids, number one, start learning at grade level again. There are gaps. I see it in my own house. And we need more resources for social and emotional supports. So, and then when we can, get back to a more robust public school experience, we will probably see an influx of students.
It's always great when you go 5th or 6th on these questions. So, I agree with a lot of what my colleagues have said. I am a parent, and I agree that I wouldn't want me making up the educational curriculum. There's people that have spent their entire professional careers dedicated to this, and by and large, they should be respected as the authorities on these matters. There's a lot of thought that goes into the curriculum that comes into our school, and we elect a school board. We elect other leaders to be able to modulate how that. Thank you, Jim. General curriculums are which ones are used in our community, which ones aren't, how they're adapted, and by and large, that's where the locus of control should be. I do believe, of course, that there should be some venue for input from parents to ensure that the curriculum continues to reflect the values of the community. But generally speaking, I'm not sure how much of this is in the purview of the state representative. I do think, to Jenny's point, to the other part of the question about enrollment, I do think that there are multiple factors driving that decrease in enrollment. And I think by and large, it's for one reason or another, whether or not our public schools are continuing to be able to fully address the breadth and depth of the needs of our kids. Whether that's mental health concerns, whether that's gifted child programs, whether that's special education programs and transportation and out-of-district placements. There is a funding need here, and I've got the red card. I do also want to make sure that we talk about, at some point tonight, hopefully, about religious education and the interface between diverse religious education and public education.
You might be able to say something in closing on that. Okay.
Hi, we have 4 kids and we're all educated in public schools and the youngest is going to village. One of my good friends did, her own schooling and it was great and they got a lot of attention. But when they moved into other schools, when they went, like in high school, went to the normal school, it was hard because these teachers are professionals. They're trained experts to deal with all kinds of variables of education. And we really can't have, I think parents should have an input, and part of their input is voting for the school committee and being involved in the parent-teachers organization. But they really can't, they shouldn't be able to put their personal politics into it because there's such a diversity in the schools that we need someone who, is a professional who's there to look at all sides of things and be fair about all sides of things. And especially, like I was talking about with COVID and gun violence, the parents on their own can deal with how they want to talk about those things, but, we have professionals at school, and why don't we use them?
Okay, we're moving on to question number 4. Terry, you're the first one. I know you all have been speaking about this, so this should be a real softball. What actions do you propose to address the environmental challenges we face in our coastal communities?
Okay, that is a good one for me. I am the department administrator to the harbor master here in Marblehead. At this point, Marblehead is conducting a federal grant, 3-point plan, 3-stage plan, sorry, I can't speak right now. The first stage of this plan for the harbor resilience and for seawalls and repairs, things like that, to fight the rising sea levels as well, is just a phase of study. The second will be to find out how much money these things are gonna cost. And the third is to see how much federal funding we can get. Swampscott is now involved in a project to do a study on a living reef to hopefully mitigate some of the sea level rise and to keep the eelgrass fields healthy. I proposed for Lynn that the Kings Beach project that we've all been talking so much about and is going to take millions and millions of dollars and probably need federal funds to get that off the ground. I'm hoping that we can incorporate the Lynn resilience of the seawalls and their mitigation of the level of rising sea levels into that project. There's also in-ground flooding in Lynn and Swampscott near the Eastern Ave area, which is under the, it's behind the line, the FEMA flood line. They all have to pay flood insurance. So if we get the federal funds and FEMA funds to do the Kings Beach project, we should be able to include the residents in those areas where they are having serious flooding problems. So yeah, that's a good question. Thanks.
Before you start, Deb, could I just ask if you could repeat the question? I apologize, thank you.
That was the shortest one I asked. What actions do you propose to address the environmental challenges we face in our coastal communities?
Thank you. So again, with coastal communities and any environmental challenges, there's short-term and long-term. Obviously, the long-term goals are going to be the ones that are actually going to mitigate climate change and ultimately help us adapt to rising sea levels. So obviously, infrastructure needs and securing money from the legislature to shore up our infrastructure. So much of the economy of the state takes place along the coastline. It makes sense that the state would help the municipalities along the coast to fund those. It's not something on the select board in my town. I was on there for 3 years, 5 years on the finance committee. We have tried to do this as a community and within a municipal budget, and it's just not possible. It's not possible no matter how healthy a community is. So we need state support. But the longer term things, and they are immediate that we need this, is renewable energy. We just have to decarbonize. So we have done some of this in the legislature and creating the next generation roadmap for climate change. There's lots of incentives. We need to create more incentives. We need to remove those barriers for people. Right now, it's the conversions that are the most difficult. You know, we can have new construction regulations that are great and zero emissions and all of that, and we have that. But the people who are in households who are renting, for example, or can't afford it, you know, electric vehicles are great, but you know, that's an environmental justice issue at that point. So we really need to think about the longer term goals of renewable energy and getting off the grid, and the business responsibility in this as well. We need to put some of that on the businesses. Thank you.
We absolutely have to foster resilient communities along the coast. Part of that is shoring up the structures that are already there and building new ones. And as we do that, we have got to think long term. 2070 is a number that is a year that's been talked about as what we need to keep in mind in terms of sea level rise when we are building, when we are fixing and building new structures. So the taxpayers, we're not going back to the taxpayers time and time again looking to fix and build again the same structures. As Terry mentioned, in Swampscott, they've got an innovative idea called the Living Reef, and that's part of their harbor plan. Marblehead has its own harbor plan. But at the end of the day, we need to get at the root cause of this, and that is, you know, continuing on the roadmap, the state's roadmap to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. The goal is 2050. Sustainable Marblehead, which is a terrific organization, thinks we can do it by 2040. And that's by placing, you know, a focus on renewable energy over fossil fuels and electrifying our transportation and, as Polly mentioned, retrofitting our homes to be electrified and new construction. New construction is low-hanging fruit for this. So
Alrighty.
Climate crisis is here now and affecting us significantly in these communities. We need a bold plan for moving us forward more aggressively than what the state has talked about and more aggressively than Sustainable Marblehead. The technology is developing quickly, and with the right incentives and the right infrastructure support, we can achieve our goals sooner, equitably. I've put out a very, very detailed plan, again, dougforrep.com, on how to get there. 3 things: transportation, buildings, and power sources. People have alluded to it, but I'm going to be more specific. We need to electrify the commuter rail. We need to restore the ferry in Lynn. We need larger electric vehicle incentives so that there is no economic justice issue there, and the combination of the federal and state incentive is sufficient to make any electric vehicle the same cost as a gas-powered car. Power sources. We have huge wind farms off our coast. We have much more opportunity. The legislature's moved aggressively in this way, and I commend them, and I think we can actually set more aggressive targets. Heating and cooling buildings, biggest challenge. The industry is more nascent. We need bigger incentives to help people make a very complicated decision to actually move towards heat pumps. But with the right incentive structure, we can get there quicker. Much more to say. Please see the plan. Thank you.
Great question. So in this coastal district, there's no greater threat to the quality of life and our regional economy than climate change. We need to address this problem with urgency. I grew up on the Merrimack River. My father was the harbor master. We have a riverboat that went up and down the river. He always told us how important it was to clean up the Merrimack River, how closely tied the city was to the river as far as, in regional economy and quality of life in industries like fishing and tourism and things like that. I see the same similarities here in this district with our ocean and our beaches and how it really will affect our quality of life. We'll look at Kings Beach. We know that we got funding last year that Lori Ehrlich and Senator Crichton got. But it's going to affect us even more. We need to clean this beach up. We need to get federal funds. We need to get state funds to continue in that. I would like to be on the standing committee for global warming and climate change if I get to the legislature, because I believe this is obviously the most important work for us right now and for our children. We need to accelerate the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy by 2035, and we also have to get to it in public transportation by 2045, and this was put forth for with the Mass Climate Action Network, and we need to seize on environmental and economic opportunities of offshore winds.
Thank you. I've said at every door I've knocked, every debate we've been at, that the climate is my #1 issue, and it really is. I want to pick up the baton right where Representative Ehrlich left it on this issue, where she was a real champion for the environment, particularly. First, the Climate Roadmap Bill sets 2050 as our goal year for net zero emissions. Now that's a political number, and that's okay because it was set by politicians. But as an environmentalist, I know that that goal is not enough to really mitigate the effects of climate change, some of which we're already seeing today. So we need to ensure that we're accelerating that schedule and getting to net zero emissions ahead of 2050. Furthermore, we need to focus on preparing our grid. And many people, while we've been knocking doors, we've seen folks in Marblehead on the municipal grid experiencing rolling brownouts during peak usage times. This is going to become only more and more normal as we continue to electrify our systems. What we need to do is take advantage of that with the finest engineers in the world to study at UMass Lowell and MIT and prepare our grid so that when we're ready to go fully electric, the grid is ready for us to all come on there. Additionally, we need to make sure that we're keeping environmental justice concerns at the forefront of our methods, as well as a just transition for workers. I absolutely agree that the Commonwealth is in a unique position to take advantage of offshore wind. Wouldn't it be great if those were being produced at the GE in Lynn? I hope to be a leader on this issue, and that is my time.
Okay. Sorry. Next question. Holly's first?
Yes.
Yes, Holly's first. This is a question of concern to many in the Jewish community. It's a little bit of a long question, so I'll try and read it slowly. Out of all the countries in the world, including human rights abusers like North Korea and Iran, BDS advocates seek to boycott, divest, and sanction the only Jewish state on the planet, Israel. As of 2021, 35 states have passed bills or issued executive orders designed to discourage boycotts of Israel, not Massachusetts. Do you support similar legislation in Massachusetts?
Could you just repeat the second half of the question so I make sure you, starting at the 35 states,
As of 2021,
2021?
35 states have passed bills or executive orders have been issued designed to discourage boycotts of Israel. Do you support similar legislation in Massachusetts?
Right, no, I don't. People should be able to have, as part of their First Amendment rights, be able to express their views, political views, religious views, and the things that they support and don't. To discourage people from supporting their Israel and their views on Israel is dangerously close to infringing on a First Amendment right to speech. I will say, though, is that I think that in terms of how we can create a greater tolerance of differing people's views starts with early education, and I think that one of my top priorities is integrating social emotional learning into the early education and through education curriculum, and then progressing that throughout in sophistication throughout the grade levels, so that we can have students learn how to have conversations with each other of differing views that don't have to lead to, legislative level prohibitions or discouragements on speaking out in support of your views. And I hope I answered. I hope that answered your question. Thanks.
You answered it. You did answer it.
Sorry, Marty, I just want to clarify, your question was, do we support passing legislation discouraging boycotts?
Boycotts, divestment, and sanctioning of the only Jewish state on the planet as compared to human rights abuses like Iran and North Korea.
Right, yes.
It has passed, to some extent, 35 other states.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I support passing legislation that discourages boycotts of Israel. You okay, Paula?
No, I'm sorry.
You can, yeah. Can you stop my time? Sorry. Yes, so you got my answer on that. I think I'm probably the only person up here, I could be wrong though, who stood on the Golan Heights and been to the West Bank and experienced the power and the importance of the only democracy in the Middle East. My first job on Capitol Hill, I was in charge of Middle East policy. I was taken to Israel by the American Jewish Committee as part of a congressional mission, and it was a transformational experience in my life. I went on to work at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and supporting Israel, fighting for Israel is something that's always been incredibly important to me. And as we witness the rise of anti-Semitism in our own country, I think it's incredibly important that we all support Israel, the only Jewish state, because it is, it's not just a powerful symbol, it is a practical homeland for those of us of Jewish descent, and it is, that's all I have to say.
Well, obviously this is a little bit of a tricky question. So I think the most important thing is to kind of pull the camera back and understand, why this is such a fraught and complicated situation. This has been a long-standing issue, obviously, in the Middle East, and the relationship between Israel and its neighbors has endless history to it. And it's only because of all of that history that we're actually here talking about whether or not we should be passing a law in one state in the United States about boycott, disinvestment, and sanctions. So, to be honest with you, I would want to actually see the language. I don't think this is an issue that one can talk in generalities about. One should be very specific, a little bit to the points that Polly was making. I don't think, obviously, that Israel should be treated in the same, group as North Korea and Iran, etc. But it's really, we need to kind of get at the fundamental issues that are going on here, whether or not it's about BDS or it's about anti-Semitism in our own communities here. There's a deep need for education for all of us about the history, about the conflict, about ways to move forward. The stalemate is tragic for people in the Middle East. It's tragic for all of us to live in a world where this continues to happen. So I think it really needs to be seen in that broader context.
Thank you. Yes, I would have to look more into this bill. I want to see the balance of free speech versus the boycott on Israel. I'm running to be a state legislator. I'm not holding myself out to be a foreign policy specialist, but I view Israel as our most important ally in the Middle East, and we need to support democracies because our democracy is at risk right now. I mean, there could be reasonable disagreements about policies and actions of government and power at any given time, but that happened here as well. For example, I strongly disagree with the policies of our disgraced ex-president, Trump, and viewed opposing those policies as my patriotic thing to do. I've never visited Israel, though I'd love the opportunity to visit. I've had the opportunity to work with many Jewish organizations with my work against gun violence. I joined and worked with the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, and we worked along the group JALSA, and also we had members of Jewish congregations from around the state, from Temple Beth Elohim and Temple Israel, and this is a very important life-saving work, and these people are still very active on it, and it's like anyone who saves a life is as if he saved an entire world.
So I'm going to answer the question very straightforward. I would not support, it's a bill, I do not support the mission of BDS at the end of the day. I think that when we talk boycotts, divestment, and sanctioning, we're not hurting Israel, we're hurting the Israeli people. And we need to be able to see that when we talk about this nuanced issue. It's people's issues with Israel aren't about the people, aren't about the common everyday people who live there, in the Middle East, just trying to go to school, get a job, get an education, and live amongst the fellow Jewish people. So I think that when we take an organization like BDS, at the end of the day, it hurts the Israeli people, and it doesn't achieve the mission that they think it might achieve. I want to say that I really appreciate the way that this question was posed, because as we're all running for the state legislature, what would we have to do with foreign policy? But clearly we would. I look forward to learning more about this issue. If I'm so fortunate to be elected, I look forward to taking the state legislator-sponsored trip to Israel, and so I could share. I haven't been, Jenny, but I think it would be very interesting to be there and learn more about this issue and ensure that we're doing all that we can to support the Israeli people, whether or not we agree with the actions of the government. And that goes for just about any other country on the planet, by the way.
Okay, so 50 years ago, we finally gave the Jewish people their own state. Israel has every right to exist. It is a country that contributes positively to the world. It's one of the only Arab countries in the Arab area, in that region, sorry, okay. So it's one of the only countries in the region that actually recognizes the rights of women, that allows women to own property and for women's health, reproductive rights, and all of that. Is it perfect? Is the country perfect on how they treat the Palestinian people? No, nothing's perfect. However, I truly feel that we need to pass some sort of legislation, not restricting the right to boycott, because that's an American right. We saw it in the South during the civil rights movement. The boycott was one of the things that really, really jump-started that movement, and I agree with that. However, I think legislation, we could modify the current bill to cover all people, rather than just Israel, make it fair across the board. That if you're looking at anti-Semitism, or if you're you're choosing one specific country or one specific people, that's not gonna fly. Anti-Semitism is real, and we've seen it in this community, and it's on the uptick, and we need to make our people feel safe, and if that's the way to do it, then a little bit of legislation would be okay with me.
Thank you. Okay, our sixth question, and Jenny, you're first, I believe, on this one.
Great.
We have talked about this before, this topic, when you answered other questions, fiscal questions. So if you can be a little more specific, the question is, what is your vision for making mass transit more affordable and effective for residents?
The first thing we have to do is invest. Public transportation has been cut and neglected for so long, and that's why we have trains on fire. The federal government, the Biden administration, has put unprecedented funds out for transportation. Massachusetts is absolutely eligible for some of this money. I support the Fair Share Amendment, which would also provide money for transportation as well as education. So investment is number one. We also need to have a greater focus on safety. Maura Hill has actually recently suggested that she would appoint a safety chief, which would go a long way towards bringing accountability in our transportation system. And then we have to explore a fundamental restructuring of the transportation system. And that's going to require some longer-term thinking. It could mean moving the MBTA into the Department of Transportation. This is something that has to be considered. But the only way we're going to get there is, again, it's a combination of investment, safety, and reform.
Yeah, I generally agree. As if we didn't know already, We had the 46th worst transportation system in a survey last year. God knows what it is right now. There's a lot that's been done. We've been trying to patch the system together for way too long. It was built in the 1880s. We need to fundamentally rethink our transportation system here. We have 21st going on 22nd century state, and we need to think about the fact that Paris also built their original transportation system in 1880, and some of us had the pleasure of being there recently, not me, but it's much better than ours, and you don't feel like you're in the 1880s when you're riding the Paris transportation system. So that's the vision that I have. We need to be thinking about a 25 to 50-year plan about fundamentally greening and redoing our entire system. Now, that's going to be massive, massive disruption. But I think at this point, people are so fundamentally afraid and frustrated with this system that the only way we can get people's buy-in, money will follow, but we need a vision, we need a strategy, we need to know where we're going, and at least then when we're going to encounter all this disruption, we'll know that we're kind of going towards a better place. And hopefully that's just Boston and not like a better place. So there's a lot of things we need to do in the near term that we've talked about that needs to keep happening, but fundamentally the big thing is we need to think bigger and devote our resources to getting there.
I agree. We have to make sure that we keep up our transportation system. What's been happening is just outrageous. We have to put major investment in upgrading the MBTA so that we have a functional, safe, and reliable system. And when I say safe, that should be a given, but it's not. So we have our problem with Lynn, with the train station closing down. This should have been dealt with much earlier. And now we're in a situation where we have to try to mitigate the problem. I agree, we need to have a ferry service from Lynn to Boston. I understand that the terminal is already there, and we need to do this. And we need to make sure that the people in Lynn who get on the commuter shuttle that's going to go back to Swampscott to then go to Boston, they're not paying more to get on a train in Swampscott. And also, we have to get federal infrastructure money to help with with the safety of it, but also we need to electrify our train station. We're going to have more green trains, smaller, going back and forth, more reliable. We're trying to attract people to the MBTA, but with all of these things happening, people don't want a part of it. And I know I commute every day, and I don't want a part of it either, but I don't have a choice.
Well, thank you. So again, Senator Crichton, the chair of the Transportation Committee, secured $50 million for electrification of the Newburyport-Rockport line, as well as $28 million to bring back the ferry service in the most recent transportation bond bill. It's extremely important that that bill is put out to bid so that those projects are funded and carried through. And I'm certainly in favor of that. I think we also need to talk about, when we say mass transit, even if we had a world-class transportation system, I think we all know that people in this district, a lot of them would still use their cars. So we need to make sure we're doing something about Bell Circle, where we've all sat in traffic, especially with the proposed development down at Suffolk Downs. Thousands of units of housing, millions of square footage of retail. It's extremely important. I look forward to taking the lead as part of a North Shore delegation on this issue to investigate it. But folks, the fact of the matter is, this is one of those questions. Guess what? We're all in favor of the Fair Share Amendment. We're all in favor of investing more in public transportation, as we've all said. What you have to ask yourself is, who here is going to do it? Who has the existing relationships with Rep. Cahill and Senator Crichton to get in there and really join that unified North Shore voice? Who has waited on the commuter rail platform at 6:30 in the morning as snow starts to fall, looking around and realizing the train's going to be very late and I'm going to be late to school? Who's lived here his entire life and knows the issues of Marblehead, Swampscott, and Lynn, and the issues of the commuter? That's me. That's the different perspective that I hope to bring to really get things done for this entire district and for the entire Commonwealth.
Okay, first thing I need to say is none of us up here are running for governor. So these questions, as great as they are, I'm not sure how much a state rep can really do other than bring funding back to this district. For us, for the people here, in the short term, you know, we did get, Seth Moulton got $20 million to help with the Linway. You know, 20 million is not a lot, but we can start by widening the right lanes so that the buses can get through better. Move back the businesses a little bit. Have, you know, pedestrian overpasses if we do get a ferry that's going to be going from behind, that's where the ferry station is behind the Linway. Short term, we need express buses to Wonderland during rush hour so that you're not getting on and, you know, stopping every 5 minutes to let somebody get out who's going to Walmart. You know, I would like to see shuttles from Marblehead to the train station. No way to get anywhere from Marblehead in public transit really, other than getting on a bus that stops every 5 minutes. And you just want to kill yourself, you're crazy. So, you know, I think that we need to update the MBTA. The transportation system in this whole country is third world, absolutely. And this country should not be anything. We should not be saying third world when we refer to this country, but we are. So I think what we need to do is focus on what the people here need and, you know, to mitigate the problems that are existing right now for our people in this district. The rest is going to be a huge project that I will vote in favor of, but I don't think I'm going to be the one planning it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I think making the transit more affordable for residents, yeah, I mean, I have recently learned that the commuting is free from about now through the end of September, which is the least the MBTA could do for us. But just a side note, so in the meantime, the infrastructure bond bill has brought a lot of money to open up a lot of opportunity to invest in infrastructure and safety. But those are really just the most basic, you know, mitigating factors that we could do, even though it's billions of dollars. We also have the capital plan, which does make some progress toward hybrid, not full electrification, and other capital needs. But the real thing is, I think this is truly an example where we need just a structural change. Not just a structural change in terms of how much we lump sum invest in the MBTA to actually get it. We can't peck away at this problem. It's just, it's too far gone. But also the management. Something is not working. We have to protect people's jobs. We have to make sure that they are secure, but we also need to have, there's some structural change that needs to happen, whether it's taking it out to manage capital needs into, you know, MDOT instead of the MBTA, and MBTA just doing operating needs. Something needs to change there. And in the long term, yes, fair share amendment. We do have some ARPA funds available that are flex funds. And I just want to say, because it's really bugging me, I don't think I understood the question before, and I'm really upset about that because it matters a lot to me to be really accurate in my answer when I give something of such absolute critical importance to not just people in this room, but to everybody. And I apologize for being confused by the question and not knowing the appropriate way to answer it. But I trust that you know that I care a lot and I want everyone's rights. And no one should be discriminated against, and we need to protect people against such behavior. So, thanks.
All right, thank you, Pauline. Okay, this is 1 minute for a closing statement, and your turn to close the deal, so to speak. So, Doug, you're up first.
All right, well, thank you very much to the JCC and to everyone here in this room and at home watching us. I know I've had a good time here and I look forward to more conversations. As I said earlier, I'm running to deliver real progress on the issues that matter, and we have talked about them tonight, thankfully. Affordable health care. We didn't talk about housing, another issue. climate change, good education, transportation, reproductive health freedom, and cleaning up our politics from special interests. I hope I've been able to share with you some background on my experience and career and being able to drive large-scale change, that we do need someone from this district who can absolutely contribute to that type of progress. I've already shown leadership in this race on cleaning up our politics from special interests. I have the most detailed plans, as I've talked about, at dougforup.com, and I've visited, most importantly, 8,000 of you at your doors, and I look forward to spending more time with you in the coming years. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank the JCC for organizing this forum tonight. I thought I would close with a story about results, the kind of leadership that we need. Unfortunately, I lost someone close to me to gun violence. To help me get through it, I got involved. I knew it wasn't somebody else's problem anymore. I became active with Moms Demand Action. I worked with the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. I worked alongside Jewish community organizations like JALSA, and I testified before the Joint Committee on Public Safety, and I spoke at State House rallies for the Red Flag Law. The Red Flag Law would have saved my friend's life. I was very, very happy when it got passed. I consider this as one of my biggest accomplishments as an advocate. The legislature is planning to take up gun legislation early next year, and it's important that we have someone who is experienced to rewrite those laws and who's been impacted by gun violence and understand it and have the passion for it. So that's a distinction between myself and the other candidates. I'm the only candidate in this race who's gotten real results in making.
I'm going to have to cut you off.
Sorry.
Well, thank you again to all of you for being here tonight. It's fantastic to see so many friendly faces, some of whom I've known my entire life, some of whom I've met knocking doors. Again, my name is Tristan Smith, and I hope that tonight I was able to provide some of that distinction from the other folks running against me in this race, and why I'm the right person to deliver for our district. I do have experience. I have the experience of being a lifelong resident and understanding these people and these problems. I have the experience of being a lifelong Democrat and committed to my values. And I have the experience of being a student in the public schools, a teacher in the public schools, a member of our community who's devoted to making our communities better. And if you don't believe me, take it from the people who really do have experience. I have the honor of being endorsed by former Congressman Barney Frank, former Congressman John Tierney, Swampscott Board of Health member Marianne Speranza Hartman, former State Senator Tom McGee, and many, many more, including the Swampscott Local Teachers Union. These folks have heard my pitch and seen the same resume that I've shared with all of you, and they're backing me. I ask for your vote and for your faith on September 6th. Thank you.
And what sets me apart is simple. I'm the only person in this race, aside from Polly, that's actually been elected to represent people. I don't do this for money or power. I do it to help. I do it to make everybody's life a little bit easier. You know, I have spoken to representatives, Tucker and Belcito and Iderhoven, and there's one common denominator. A state rep's job is to take care of the people in their district, to take that phone call from someone who can't get their parents into senior housing, or to make sure that people that have been affected by hate crimes know that you will unite the community to rally around them and keep them safe. You know, it's a matter of people, and the power of the state rep has been overstated in this whole election. I speak from the heart and I mean what I say. I know how to play the game, and I can get this job done. Ask my union members if I've ever given up, ever. They'll tell you I don't. I'm the bulldog, and I fight to win. I have grit and determination, and I will carry this through for all of you, and I will fight for all of you.
Thank you, everyone. So our district and the state are facing some of the most pressing issues of our time. But the climate change, housing crisis, MBTA, mental health, substance use disorders, you name it. But all of these issues didn't kind of emerge overnight. They've been simmering for a really long time. And so there needs to be kind of like a two-pronged approach that I would take, and that I take with most problems that I have to deal with on a policy level. First, sort of some of the short-term initiatives that we've discussed tonight, but we have to at some point be more proactive and more visionary in our legislating. It's not enough to be economically or racially or socially neutral in our legislation. We have to be anti-injustice, anti-discriminatory in our policies if we're ever going to actually see sufficient structural change to address the literal crises that so many tens of thousands of families and individuals are facing in our state. I have shown that I am not afraid to stand out and fight against, even when colleagues are against me, in a respectful way, when it's the right thing to do, and I would be honored to do that as your next representative. Thank you.
I can do that. Thank you to the JCC for hosting. Thank you, Marty, for moderating. You know, after listening to my background, a woman I met on the door said, "Wow, you sound shovel-ready." And she's exactly right. I am the only candidate with legislative experience on both Capitol Hill and Beacon Hill. I am the only candidate who has created a grassroots democratic organization in this community, for this community. And I am the only candidate who's fought for reproductive rights with work at Planned Parenthood. I don't view the job of state rep as a stepping stone to anything but service to you. Longevity matters, and if I am lucky enough to be elected, I will serve as long as you will have me. I am eager to get started, so I humbly ask for your vote on or before September 6th. Thank you.
But now we can clap, everybody. I know it's going to be a very difficult choice. I think you all did beautifully, and this community should be proud of its candidates. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for being very attentive and very focused. So good luck to you all, and yes, good luck. Good night, everyone.